Dear students, this video covers topics related to traffic engineering from Module 4 and Module 5 of Transportation Engineering 1. Let's start. Traffic engineering deals with the movement of people and goods and how to apply scientific principles and other tools to the efficient movement. It involves planning and geometric design and also regulation and control of movement. We know that the traffic in India is heterogeneous in nature. That is, we have different classes of vehicles with widely varying characteristics on road. Characteristics of vehicles are size of the vehicle, power of the vehicle, number of occupants in the vehicle, etc. In traffic engineering, first we will be learning about traffic characteristics. In traffic characteristics, first comes road user characteristics. Road users are the humans, which can be a pedestrian, a cyclist, a cart driver like a bullock cart driver, or a motorist, which is a driver of a passenger of a vehicle. Among human characteristics, first one comes physical characteristics, which involves vision, hearing, and strength. Vision plays the important role, like we have a field of clear or acute vision within a cone of angle 3 degrees, but up to 10 degrees the vision will be satisfactory. Then depth judgment is important because to know the distance and speed of the vehicles which is coming in the opposite direction. Also glare is important because we must be able to adapt to changes of light. That is, when a vehicle moves from darkness to light, or when it moves from light to darkness. For example, in case of entering a tunnel in the daytime and leaving a tunnel. So we go from light to dark and dark to light. In that case, or at night when we travel, a headlight of the vehicle traveling in our opposite direction, that headlight will cause some glare in our eyes. So we must be able to adapt to that change of light. So clear vision in a cone of 3 degrees or maybe up to 10 degrees. Then depth judgment and glare are the important characteristics which affects vision. Then hearing helps drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists. With the hearing ability, we will be able to hear horns or vehicle sounds, etc. Then strength, we require strength to operate the vehicle. This diagram shows the field of vision. This is a human eye. So the acute vision cone is 3 to 10 degrees and the fairly clear zone is 10 to 12 degrees. We will be able to see anything in our peripheral vision range 120 to 180 degrees. Any object will be sensed by us, but the clear zone is only 3 to 10 degrees or maximum up to 10 to 12 degrees where it is fairly clear. Then the second road user characteristic is mental characteristics, which helps us to possess knowledge of vehicle characteristics, traffic behavior, driving practice, rules of roads, etc. Also, experience is one mental characteristic which helps us to deal with certain difficult traffic situations. And also intelligence and literacy, to read traffic signs or to understand regulations. We must be intelligent and we must be literate. Then comes the psychological characteristics, which deals with the emotional factors like attentiveness, fear, anger, etc., which can be dangerous while driving or while traveling on the road. And also distractions or getting distracted by events happening on the road or nearby the road. Then dangerous actions due to impatience of drivers or pedestrians. Then some road users do not pay any regard to traffic rules. Despite being literate or emotionally stable, they do not have the right attitude. That is also dangerous. Then comes the environmental characteristic. Like when we travel on a road, there can be some vehicles which travel very slow. So that will give an aggressive driver a tendency to overtake. So that is the traffic environment. Then adaptability to different traffic stream characteristics. That is, a driver will have to drive among slow vehicles, fast vehicles, aggressive vehicles, etc. So he must be able to adapt to that traffic environment. And also the purpose of entering the traffic stream. Drivers will be driving for the purpose of uh, work, then pleasure trips, then emergencies or recreational purpose, etc. Then after road user characteristics comes vehicular characteristics. First is vehicle dimensions. The width of the vehicle affects the width of the traffic lanes, and shoulders, which are the road sides where the vehicles should be parked in case of an emergency, and parking facilities. Length of the vehicle and length of the wheelbase, that is, length of the wheelbase is distance between the centers of two wheels. Both these length and length of wheelbase will affect the extra width of the pavement at horizontal curves, because at horizontal curves the centrifugal force acts and there is a tendency to uh, off track or move away from the center of the curve. So here extra width will be influenced by the length and the length of the wheelbase. Also, it influences the minimum turning radius and the safe overtaking distance. Then minimum turning radius uh, depends on the length of the wheelbase and the steering system. Height of the vehicle affects the clearance to be provided under the bridges or electric service lines, etc. Second vehicular characteristic is weight of the loaded vehicles. Maximum weight of the vehicle and the axle loads will affect the design of pavement thickness and gradients. This you have seen in the pavement design problems and in the gradient compensation problems, etc. Then comes the power of the vehicle. Power of the heaviest vehicle is considered in finding out the permissible and limiting values of the gradient. You have already seen the definitions of permissible and limiting values of gradient in class. Then comes the power also determines the speed and acceleration of the vehicle, and speed and acceleration is used in the geometric design of the road and also in traffic regulations like fixing speed limits. Next vehicular characteristic is speed of the vehicle. Speed of the vehicle affects the sight distance, super elevation, then length of transition curve, limiting radius, length of transition curve on vertical valley curves, width of traffic lanes and shoulders, design gradient, etc. Braking characteristics. Braking characteristics depends on the braking system and its efficiency. Safety of vehicle operation, stopping distance, etc. depends on the efficiency of the braking system. Highway capacity and overtaking side distance also depends on the braking characteristics. If we have more braking capacity, the side distance required will be lesser. Next comes traffic volume studies. Traffic volume studies are one type of traffic studies. Traffic volume is the number of vehicles that can pass a section on the road during unit time. That is, for example, number of vehicles that pass through a given road in 1 hour. It will be expressed in units of vehicles per hour, number of vehicles per hour. Vehicle classes present in our roads are buses, cars, trucks, auto rickshaws, heavy commercial vehicles, then two-wheelers, then we have some cycles, cycle rickshaws, animal drawn vehicles like bullock carts, etc. Then we have different types of vehicles, but so we cannot say that there are 100 cars and 20 buses and 30 trucks and 10 cycles going on the road. We have to express it as number of vehicles per hour, but all vehicles are not the same. So we express the flow or traffic volume in the form of an equivalency factor, in terms of an equivalency factor called the passenger car unit. So every vehicle should be converted into PCU or passenger car unit, and traffic flow can be expressed in terms of PCUs per hour. There are different methods of classified traffic volume studies. Traffic volume is generally speaking about traffic flow, that is in vehicles per hour. Classified traffic volume refers to the classified volume of different type of vehicles. So the method of conducting classified volume studies are: first is manual count, that is a field team of enumerators will be there and they will be counting the number of vehicles in the locations required, and they will record it in sheets which are prepared prior to the survey. Then following details will be collected, like how many vehicles passed and different types of vehicles, the direction they traveled, the time they passed, then the number of heavy vehicles, number of occupants in each passenger vehicle, like how many people were traveling in a car, how many people were traveling in a bus, how many people were traveling in three-wheelers and two-wheelers. This will be noted down by the enumerators. And then also the details of pedestrian volume. How many pedestrians were walking along the roadside? How many pedestrians were crossing at the location? Main drawback of the manual count method is that we cannot conduct it for a longer period of time, and also we cannot conduct it for all days of an year. Next method is the automatic traffic counter cum classifier method. That is, there are electronic machines or equipments which can be installed on the roadside, which can be portable or permanently fixed. This will record the number of vehicles with the help of some sensors which will sense the vehicle speed, the tire size, the wheelbase, and it will find out, or it will sense the type of vehicle and the movement characteristics, and it will be recorded in the inside the instrument, and later we can retrieve the data from the computer. This automatic machines can work throughout the day and night. Whenever we want the count, it will give the count live. Next, how to present the traffic volume data. If you count the number of vehicles and the classification, how to present it? First, terminology used to present the traffic volume data is annual average daily traffic, that is AADT, which is the average daily traffic for 365 days of the year. Next comes average daily traffic, which is ADT, which is for only 3 to 7 days, not for 365 days or a whole month or something like that. Then comes the trend charts, which shows the volume trends or change or volume of traffic for period of years. That is how traffic volume changes during recent years. That is shown in a trend chart. Then there are variation charts which shows change in traffic volume in every hour through different days and in different seasons. Then there are traffic flow maps which shows the different routes connecting the different origins and destinations, and also thickness of these lines represent the volume. Then there is the design hourly traffic volume, that is determined from the plot between the hourly volume and the number of hours. So the peak hourly volume will not be economical. Like if in a day or if in a year you have you take traffic count for all the hours in a year, and in the highest you have for an hour is 2000 vehicles per hour. But if you design the road for that highest value of peak hourly volume, the traffic will always be lesser than 2000 vehicles per hour. Most of the time, or 99% of the time, only during that 1 or 2 hour in a year the volume will be exceeded, but that design will cost much more than the other designs, because it will not be economical to construct a road for maximum capacity. Instead, we take the value of the 30th highest hourly traffic volume, which is the 30th highest value of hourly volume, or 30th highest peak hourly volume. That will be exceeded only 29 times or for only 29 hours in a year. During all the rest of the time, the traffic will be smoothly moving through the road. So that is a compromise between economy and design. Congestion will be experienced only during the 29 hours. All the rest of the hours, traffic will be smooth through the facility. This graph shows the peak hourly volume or highest hourly volume. You can see in the y-axis hourly traffic volume, and in the x-axis number of hours exceeding that volume. From this plot, you can take the 30th highest hourly volume and use it for the design. You can see that number of hours exceeding is plotted in the x-axis. From here, you take the value of hourly volume corresponding to 29 hours and choose it as the 30th highest hour. This one. Next is the traffic speed studies. Speed of a vehicle varies depending on the geometric features, traffic regulations, traffic volume, purpose of the trip, time of travel, type of vehicle, characteristics of the driver, climatic and environmental factors, etc. And there are different types of speed when it comes to traffic. First is the spot speed, which is the instantaneous speed or the speed of a vehicle at a moment at a location. And average speed is the average of spot speeds of all the vehicles passing through that point. Running speed is the average speed maintained by the vehicle over a stretch of road. That is, over a stretch of road at different points the vehicle will be having different speeds. An average of all these speeds will give the running speed of that particular vehicle. Then there is the travel speed or the overall speed, which is obtained by dividing the distance by the time of travel, and this time will include even the delays or the stopped time of the vehicle. So travel speed or overall speed is the total distance traveled divided by the travel time including the stopped time or the delays. First, spot speed studies. So there are two types of speeds when it comes to spot speed. Spot speed is the speed at an instant at a location of a vehicle. First is space mean speed. Second is time mean speed. Space mean speed is the average speed of vehicles, all the vehicles in a certain stretch of road at one moment. So at a particular instant, we take a stretch of road, say 1 kilometer length. All the vehicles present in that 1 kilometer road at that instant, what are the speeds of all these vehicles? Take the average, you get the space mean speed. Then the time mean speed, which is the speeds or spot speeds of all vehicles passing one point on a roadway over a certain period of time. That is, for 1 hour we observe the spot speed of all the vehicles passing one point, and we take the average, we get the time mean speed of vehicles over 1 hour. That is, the uses of spot speed studies are that it is used in planning, regulations and control measures like speed limit. Then it is used for the design of geometric elements. It is used to fix the design speed of existing or new facilities. Then it can be used in accident studies and also in traffic capacity studies. How to measure spot speed? How to measure spot speed is, one method is that to take a short distance of 15 or 30 meters, then uh, take the time where the vehicles pass this distance. So the distance is known and time we have collected from the field. So distance by time gives the spot speed of different vehicles. When we take the average, we get the average spot speed. Then there is a radar speed meter, where we can measure speed with an equipment called the radar speed meter. That equipment can be pointed at the vehicle along its direction of travel. That is a line of vehicle travel. So we get an accurate estimate in the range of 5 km per hour to 300 km per hour. So speeds out of this range will not be measured by the radar speed meter. And the accuracy depends upon how close we hold the radar speed meter close to the line of vehicle travel. And the measurement mechanism is that the signal which is sent by the radar speed meter will be reflected by the speeding vehicle, and the difference in frequency of the signal and the reflected signal will be proportional to the speed of the vehicle. You can see the image of a radar speed meter here. It can be fixed on a tripod or it can be handheld device. It is pointed along the line of travel of the vehicle and it gives us the speed. Next comes the presentation of spot speed data. How spot speed data can be presented or represented. That is using frequency distribution diagram. That is, in x-axis you represent the average values of speed groups, and in y-axis you give the percentage of vehicles. From this graph we obtain the model speed. Then comes the cumulative speed distribution graph, where in x-axis you plot the average values of speed group, same as here, and y-axis cumulative percentage of vehicles. In frequency distribution diagram it was just percentage of vehicles, but in cumulative speed distribution diagram in y-axis it becomes cumulative percentage of vehicles. From this you get the 85th percentile speed. That is a speed at which 85% of vehicles, speed below which 85% of the vehicles are passing. So from frequency distribution diagram you get the modal speed, and from cumulative distribution diagram you get the 85th percentile speed, which is usually adopted as the safe speed limit of a road. In this slide you can see the frequency distribution diagram. Speeds you have in the average speeds you have in the y-axis, x-axis on both cases, and percentage of vehicles you have here. in cumulative diagram it is a cumulative percentage. From this frequency distribution diagram you obtain the modal speed, and from the cumulative frequency distribution diagram you get the 85th percentile speed and also the 98th percentile speed. The 85th percentile speed is usually taken as the safe speed limit. The 98th percentile speed is taken usually as the design speed. Next comes speed and delay studies. So in traffic studies, until now we have seen the traffic volume studies and then the speed studies. Next comes the speed and delay studies. Delay is the stopped time during the travel of a vehicle. So it gives the fluctuations in speed and also the location of delay, the cause of delay, the frequency of delay, and the duration of delay. Delay can be fixed delay, like due to traffic signal or at level crossing when a train passes, vehicles has to stop, or it can be operational delay, like due to turning vehicles or parking or unparking of vehicles on the roadside, or due to pedestrians, the vehicles has to slow down or stop for some time, or when the traffic volume is very high or there is congestion, when there is a traffic block, the vehicles have to stop, or when there is an accident on the road, we have to stop the vehicle. So all these are operational delays. Then there are different methods of conducting speed and delay studies. First one is the floating car method. In the floating car method, you have a test vehicle which travels along the road where you have to conduct the speed and delay study. Then there are a number of test runs made by the test vehicle with a group of observers inside it. The observers record the duration, time, location, and cause of all the delays, fixed delays and operational delays, and also number of vehicles overtaking the test vehicle, and number of vehicles overtaken by the test vehicle, and number of vehicles traveling in opposite direction to the test vehicle are noted down. So all these details are collected by the observers inside the test vehicle, and multiple test runs are conducted. Okay, so after conducting the test runs, the average journey time is given by the equation t is equal to tw minus ny by q, and q is equal to na plus ny divided by ta plus tw. That gives the number of vehicles or the traffic flow or volume in that stream. The different notations used in the equations are explained below. So after the floating car method for speed and delay study comes the second method, that is the license plate or the vehicle number method, that is done by observers stationing at the entrance and exit of a test stretch, that is a road, and the timings and vehicle numbers are noted down, that is the license plate numbers, and the time in which the vehicle passed is noted down. Then you get the total travel time and you know the distance of the stretch. That way you get the speed and the delay. Then there is the interview technique, that is by interviewing the road users, that is how much time they took to travel and what all delays were experienced by them. Then comes the elevated observation and photographic technique, where observers are positioned at elevated points so that they can watch the road beneath and the vehicles, and they can use any recording equipment to record the traffic flow, and they can take it to the office and extract the data, speed data and the delay data from the video. After speed and delay studies comes origin and destination studies. So they give information on the origin of travel or trips and the destination. So the studies involve collection of data like the direction of travel and the distance of travel, that is the trip length, and the frequency or number of travel trips conducted. Then the origin and destination studies could be conducted in a small region or in an entire country. Next comes the methods of conducting origin and destination studies. First is a roadside interview method, where vehicles are stopped at roadside and they are interviewed by survey personnel using prescribed questionnaire which contains which all information is required. Then the information collected includes, or the questionnaire includes, questions pertaining to the origin of travel, destination where they are going, the route of travel, the details of intermediate stoppage or purpose of the trip, type of vehicle, number of passengers inside the vehicle, etc. And drawback of this method is that when the vehicles are stopped for data collection, there is some delay cost for the traveling. So that is an inconvenience for the passengers. Second method is the license plate method, where we cordon out. Cordon out means to separate an area or demarcate an area, and at the borders of this area, we place enumerators or survey personnel with forms to note down license plate numbers. So hence we know which all vehicles have gone out of the area and which all vehicles have entered the area. So this method is quick and it's easy to train the personnel to collect the license plate numbers. Third method is the return postcard method. That is the questionnaire from the first method or the roadside interview method. That questionnaire is printed into a prepaid postcard with the return address. And these cards can be distributed to passengers or drivers in vehicles at spots where vehicles stop, usually like toll booths or signals, and these cards can be distributed, and these cards can be taken home by the drivers or passengers, and they fill the questionnaire and send the postcards back. So there is no expense for the subjects of this survey, that is the road users, and the data can be obtained, but most users do not return the cards. Also in this method there is no delay cost for the survey by stopping vehicles, because the cards are distributed at toll booths or signals, etc. Then the fourth method is the tag on car method for origin and destination study. That is a coded card or a card like a chip, or NFC chip, or a radio frequency chip is attached to a car, and wherever the car goes, we get the electronic information from the chip which records all the information. Then there is the home interview method. That is, we visit each household with questionnaires and we collect the data regarding traveling or origin and destination of trips, or the socioeconomic characteristics, that is the age, gender, income, etc., a number of members in each household. So we get socioeconomic data and travel data, but this is a very huge sample of households that will be present in an entire area. So this is a very time consuming survey, but there is no stoppage of vehicles involved, but a large amount of data is collected in the home interview method. Then the work spot interview method, which involves the collection of data regarding origin and destination from the offices like education institutions or factories, etc. The choice of method of study, that is whether to use license plate method or whether to use road interview method or postcard method or household method, that criteria which depending upon which we choose the method is the size of the study area, whether it is a small area or a large area, then the fund available and the time available for the survey. And also there is the influence of number of persons available who will correctly respond to the survey, whether it is a household or a roadside survey, and then also the time of the year in which the survey has to be conducted. Then the sampling procedure in origin destination studies, that is, if we are conducting a roadside survey, how many people should we interview? If we are conducting a workplace survey, how many working people we should interview? If we are conducting a household survey, how many households should we go into and collect data from? So that number is found out by the sample size calculation, and sample size should be calculated by considering the criteria like the accuracy of data which should be obtained, and also the cost of data collection. Like more data if you need, it will involve more money, because more people should be paid for collecting data, more questionnaires should be printed, more time is spent, that means more money is spent. And also accuracy, usually small data sets won't give us an accurate estimate of a model of origin and destination. So we might need a large sample when we conduct survey in large cities for an accurate model or output. Next comes presentation of OD data. OD data can be presented as origin and destination tables and also desire lines. Then they can be represented as pie charts, which shows the traffic and geometrical relationships of zones. Geometrical relationship refers to the distance between the different zones. And contour lines, which is similar to topographic contours. Contours, contours are lines connecting points with equal altitude. So similarly, you can connect points with equal number of trips generated or trips completed using lines. You can join those points using lines, and that can be called contour lines. See a desire line diagram here. The line diagram is a diagram where the origin and destination of different trips are connected, and between these origin and destination the lines have different thickness. Like this is one origin, and this is a destination. This is one origin, a destination. This is one origin, a destination. Most of the trips occur between this point and the other points. So the lines have different thickness because the thickness depends on the number of vehicles. Here, this is a design line diagram for different places for trucks. So the lightest color means there are only 0 to 24 trucks traveling in that route. Darkest lines or the thickest lines are for large number of 20,000 to 30,000 trucks traveling in between those two locations. So this is a desire line diagram. Next type of traffic study is a parking study, which gives an idea about how the parking demand in the area. That is, parking is required in metropolitan cities mainly for commercial vehicles and also in residential places. And also parking on the roadside will reduce the width of the road. That will affect the capacity of the road. So parking studies are essential, and the areas covered by the parking studies are study of existing parking facilities, then how much additional parking space is required, and that is what is the parking demand, and the planning and design of new parking facilities. And also while designing parking facilities, there are some terms you must be familiar with. That is parking accumulation, which is the total number of vehicles that are parked in a given area during a specified time period. Then parking duration is the length of time for which a vehicle is occupying a parking space. Then parking occupancy, where number of spaces are occupied in a parking lot. And parking turnover is the number of times one particular parking spot has been used by different types of vehicles during a day. While designing parking facilities, you must consider the traffic flow in the road, capacity of the road, parking demand, and the space available. Parking demand is found out by different methods. Like first is by counting the number of vehicles which are parked at different periods of the day. Second one is by making cordon counts of a relatively large area. That is, you in the earlier origin and destination study method, you did that like by you cordoned out an area, and at the boundaries of that area you place enumerators, and they note down the license plate numbers of the vehicles which enter the area and leave the area. So you know that what time the vehicle entered the area and left the area. So in between that time the vehicle was parked in the particular area. So you know the parking time of that vehicle. Then by interviewing the drivers of the parked vehicle directly. That is, you can ask the driver where you went, how much time you parked, which spot did you use for parking, like that, the amount of parking fee, etc. Then comes the accident studies and analysis. The objectives of doing accident study is that you want to study the causes of the accident and what treatment can be used at those locations. What are the existing design and accident control measures? What are the proposed changes? What are the before and after studies after doing an improvement? There is one spot has many accidents and you have done a control measure or an improvement in the design, and what happened after that improvement was implemented. This is called before and after study. And to study the economical impact or the financial loss due to accidents. There are different causes of accidents. First one can be the drivers, second one pedestrians, then passengers, vehicle defects, road condition, the road design like the geometric design, then the traffic condition like different types of vehicles or disabled vehicle, etc. Then weather, then animals, stray animals which can enter the road, and other causes like any faulty sign or signal or a gate of level crossing not being closed, etc. can also cause accidents. Steps involved in accident studies are, first one is the collection of accident data. The accident data, like the first one maybe general data, date, time, persons involved, etc. Location of the accident, details of the vehicles involved, nature of the accident, like were pedestrians involved or not, whether some objects were involved, what are the type of damages, what are the injuries, etc. Then road condition at that accident time, traffic condition at the accident time, then primary causes of accident, then other probable causes or secondary causes of the accident. That is the accident cause which contributed indirectly to the happening of the accident. Then the accident cost, that is the financial aspect, that is the damages, injuries, etc. Then preparation of accident report, that is the accident report is prepared by the police authorities for legal action. And the preparation of accident records, like which are details of locations where the accident was uh, taken place. For accident records, you have location files and also spot maps. Spot maps shows the different spots or areas on a road where the accident happened. So you have here a legend for the spot maps. So this symbol in a map represents that a fatal accident involving motor vehicle and pedestrian happened at that location. This symbol shows that a non-fatal accident involving a motor vehicle and pedestrian was uh, taken place in that location. These two symbols refers to fatal and non-fatal accidents respectively involving other types of motor vehicle traffic, that is other than motor vehicle pedestrian type of accidents happened in that location. Then you have the collision diagram. Collision diagram is a diagram depicting the details of the accident location and showing the approximate path of the vehicle and pedestrians involved. You have here the collision diagram and different symbols used for preparing the collision diagram. These symbols show in which direction the vehicles traveled, in which direction the pedestrian moved, what all objects were there in that area, how the vehicles went out of control, where the injury happened, where the property was damaged. All this can be obtained from the collision diagram. Next comes the condition diagram, which is a drawing of the accident location showing the important physical features of the road, like the geometric features or any other entities like property lines, signals, signs, etc. Next topic in traffic engineering comes the traffic signs. So you have three types of signs: regulatory signs, warning signs, and informatory signs. Okay, in signs you have different letters. So what are the sizes of these letters? Those depends on the size of the sign. You have three types of sizes for signs: small, normal, and large signs. So the sizes are 600 mm, 900 mm, and 1200 mm respectively. The lettering sizes are 100, 150, and 225 mm respectively for small, normal, and large signs. Small signs on roads where the speed is less than 60 kilometers per hour. Normal signs in the range of 60 to 100 kilometers per hour. And large signs for expressways and urban arterial roads where the speed exceeds 100 kilometers per hour. That means for a driver traveling at a higher speed, you need a bigger sign for him to notice easily. Then placement of signs is in rural roads 90 meter ahead of the location which needs warning. In rolling terrains, it is 45 meters ahead. Then in major district roads, 120 meter. NH and state highway, 150 meters. In plain and rolling terrain, 75. Hilly terrain, 75 meters. Expressways, 200 meters ahead of the location you have to give the sign. In plain terrain and 100 meters in hilly terrain. The three types of signs were regulatory, warning, and informatory signs. So in regulatory signs, you call them also as mandatory signs. These signs are used to inform the road users of certain regulations and prohibitions. So violations of these regulations are a legal incriminating offense. These are the different type of regulatory signs. You have the stop sign, which has a hexagonal shape and a border. You have the give way sign, which specifies to which informs the driver to yield or wait for the vehicle in the main road to pass to enter the road. That is the meaning of the sign give way. Wait for the crossing vehicle to pass. Then entry is prohibited, one-way signs, then no parking signs, width limit, speed limit, etc. Then you have the compulsory direction control signs. That is compulsory go ahead only, compulsory turn left, compulsory turn right, etc. So types of regulatory signs are explained here. First, you have a stop sign with a border of width 30 mm white border, and the octagonal shape is in red color. And okay, stop sign means the vehicles must come to a stop before entering a major road. You will have major roads which are highways and minor roads which are the side roads which enter the main roads. So a vehicle coming in the minor road will see a stop sign because he must stop and check if there is any vehicle passing through the major road. If there is no vehicle, he can pass. Then the give way sign means he may not have to, the minor road vehicle may not have to stop, but he may have to uh, stop if there is any vehicle on the major road. Otherwise, no need of stopping. Stop sign means compulsorily stop. Prohibitory signs means prohibit certain traffic movements like U-turns or no entry or overtaking prohibited, horn prohibited, etc. No parking sign means you cannot park in that spot. The other type of traffic signs are no stopping sign, which is similar to the no parking sign. That is, you cannot stop the vehicles at that place. And the speed limit signs, which indicate the speed limit on that particular road. The vehicle control signs, which uh, describe the height limit of vehicles that can enter that road, the length limit, the axle load limit, the width limit, etc. for vehicles entering a particular road. Then you have the compulsory direction control signs, which control the direction which vehicles move, like compulsory turn left ahead only. That is, you can move ahead only. Compulsory turn left or right and keep left, etc. After regulatory signs comes warning signs or cautionary signs. These are used to warn the road users of certain hazardous conditions. They have a white background, red border and black symbols. Common warning signs are sharp curve, hairpin bends, then a narrow bridge, cycle crossing, slippery road, school zone, Y intersection, roundabout ahead, dangerous dip, hump, barrier ahead, falling rock, etc. These are the common warning signs, like right hand curve, left hand curve, side road, towards right there is a crossroad coming, that is two roads are crossing ahead of you. Then T intersection, you are approaching a T intersection, then there is a major road ahead, this is a minor road, there is a major road ahead, then there is a narrow bridge coming ahead of you, then there is a reverse bend towards the right, there is a hairpin bend towards the left, like that. The third category of signs after regulatory or mandatory and warning or cautionary signs are the informatory signs, which are rectangular in shape. They are used to guide the road users and give them some information regarding facilities or parking spaces or flood gauges which are installed at causeways and submersible bridges, etc. This image shows an example of the informatory sign. That is this one is a route marker sign which shows the road name NH11 and marks the route. Then this is a road junction approach. That is, you're approaching a road junction from where you can take separate routes to three separate locations. The locations are also indicated in the informatory sign. Both these signs are rectangular, you can see that. After traffic signs, the next type of traffic control device is a traffic signal. Traffic signs are also a type of traffic control devices. So in traffic signals, you have large number of crossing movements at some locations where you have to use traffic signals. Where normally where roads cross each other, vehicles have to turn left, turn right, go straight, etc. So different crossing movements will be conflicting each other. So there is chance of collision or accidents or traffic blocks and large delay of time for movement. So you install traffic signals. They are automatic devices which alternately give directions to stop and proceed for vehicles. The requirements of traffic signal is that it should catch the attention of the different road users. There must be certain meaning for the light which is understood by the drivers, and also there should be sufficient time given for the road user to respond to the signal. Also, minimum wastage of time must be ensured when we use a signal. The advantages of signals are that it should provide an orderly movement of traffic. The quality of flow should be improved. Then accidents should be reduced, maximum capacity should be provided, and there is a reasonable to cross or move at reasonable intervals of time. That is, delay should be minimum. The disadvantages of traffic signals are that rear-end collisions may happen when the vehicles slow down or stop at a signal. Also, improper design and location of signal can be hazardous. Signal could be failed due to power failure or technical failure, etc. And also, vehicle arrivals won't be same always. In some roads which are signalized, there won't be any vehicles on the green signal, but on the other road where vehicles are waiting, there will be a red signal where vehicles have to wait. Definition of certain terms used in traffic signals are: one is signal cycle, which is a period of time required for one complete sequence of indications. Then there is a signal phase. Signal phase is the time when one traffic moves or another traffic stops. Signal cycle is the total time for movement in all roads in an intersection. Signal phase is one phase means one period where vehicles can move or one period where vehicles should stop. So where vehicles are stopping, it is called red phase. In the same phase, some vehicles will be moving, so it will be the green phase. So one phase means some vehicles will stop and some vehicles will go. So the road where the vehicles are stopping will be called red phase. The road where the vehicles will be going is called the green phase. So at the same phase, one road will be having red phase, another road will be having green phase at an intersection, and the total time of green phases for all the roads is called a signal cycle, or total red phases for all the roads will be called a signal cycle. And interval is the time during which the signal indications do not change. Then you have the level of service, which is the sequence, and depending on the sequence and duration, how the traffic is served as desired by the drivers. That is called the level of service. Here you have a traffic signal with three colors: green to go, amber to get ready to stop, and red to stop finally. So first you give green to the vehicles on a road. At that time, all the vehicles in the other roads, crossing roads, will be given red. And as soon as many vehicles has crossed, after some time green changes to orange. That means that vehicles should in the intersection should clear fast, and vehicles approaching the intersection should stop. Then amber changes to red. Vehicles in the road stops, and somewhere in some other road green signal is given for the vehicles to enter the intersection. Here you can see an intersection. The directions are marked: north direction, south direction, east direction, and west direction. And vehicles are entering from different legs of the intersection. Vehicles from each road has to go straight, left, and right. So here for 4 different roads, the signal design is given in 4 different phases, like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. In phase 1, in the east and west roads, the straight going and one of the turning movements are given green. In phase 2, the other turning movement in the east and west roads is given green. In phase 3, these two movements from north and south are given green. In phase 4, the rest of the remaining two movements from north and south are given green. While in phase 1, while these movements are green, all the other movements will be red. In phase 2, these two movements will have green, all the others will have red. In phase 3, these 4 movements will have green, all the others will have red, like this. And these are the details of the different phases. In phase 1, that is in this phase, green time is 23 seconds and amber time is 3 seconds and red time is 78.5 seconds. When this has green, all the other phases have red. And after this phase, in phase 2, there is green. So there is an amber here, then it changes to, here it changes to green, here it again changes to red. When this has green, all the other phases remain red. So this is how a signal is explained, and all the green times together gives you the signal cycle. All the green and amber times together, or all the red times together, will give you the signal cycle. And the one phase is one green or one red. So here there are one green plus one red. So here there are four signal phases. Types of traffic signals. First, you have the traffic control signals with the red, amber, and green lights for the traffic, and pedestrian signals for the pedestrians to cross during the uh, traffic signal operation, and special traffic signals like blinking red or blinking red, blinking amber or blinking red. The blinking red shows that to stop before proceeding, and blinking amber or yellow shows to proceed with caution. Then the out of traffic control signals, again you have the before slide showed um, traffic control, pedestrian control, and special traffic control. So among traffic control, you have manually operated signals by policemen in a police station or a point nearby. Then you have fixed time signals where the green times and red times are fixed throughout the day. And then you have the automatic traffic actuated signals where vehicles arrive the intersection to cross, the in the signal may give green for them, so that vehicles are cleared as soon as they come into the intersection, and when there is no vehicle in a road, it is changed to red automatically. So that is a more efficient signal when compared to a fixed time signal, because when in some roads do not have any vehicle, that road will not be given green in case of a automatic traffic actuated signal. But in a fixed time signal, the green time and red time for the roads will always be the same. So if there is no vehicle also, that particular road will get a green time. But in automatic traffic actuated signals, only those vehicles or roads which have vehicles will get green time, and they will get green time as more vehicles keep on arriving. Next is the design of traffic signal. The objectives of signal design are that to provide sufficient capacity for the intersection, that is the place where the roads are crossing, and to reduce the delay or the waiting time or the stopping time of the vehicles. Because when a signal is operating, in the red phase vehicles are stopping. So that is called the delay. This slide shows the general principles of two-phase signal design. That is, we have to design a signal which has two phases. So we consider two roads, road 1 and road 2, and we have two phases, out of which one phase has, and one phase of one road has G1, R1, and A1 as the green, red, and amber times, and road 2 has G2, R2, A2 as green, red, and amber times. So for the stop time or red phase of road R1 is equal to sum of green time of phase 2 and amber time of phase 2. This is clear from the slide which shows the phase times which I have shown before. And then there is a clearance time, which is the time to allow stopping time for approaching vehicle to stop at stop line after signal changes from green to amber, and also to allow clearance time for vehicle which is already near the stop line to clear the intersection. Then go time or green time, that is decided based on the approach volume during the peak hour. That is how much more number of vehicles entering the intersection from a particular road means that road needs more green time. One method of traffic signal design is called Webster's method of traffic signal design. Here, the aim of the design is to minimize the average delay per vehicle. Okay, and minimizing the delay is possible when cycle length is maximum. As cycle length is more, the delay per vehicle is decreased. So assume that there are two flow values from the field Q1 and Q2, and the saturation flow or the flow during the green time is S1 and S2. So now you have to find out the optimum value of the green time. Saturation flow is S1 and S2 on two roads, and normal flow values are Q1 and Q2. Saturation flows are obtained from the flow during green time. That is when the approach is filled with the vehicles and there is movement of vehicles through the entire green time. What is the number of vehicles that can flow? So here there are two parameters which are the ratio of flow and saturation flow. Y1 is equal to Q1 by S1 for road 1, and for road 2 Y2 is equal to Q2 by S2. And here you have the optimum signal cycle duration given by the equation. CO is equal to 1.5 L plus 5 divided by 1 minus Y. L is the total lost time per cycle, which is given by 2N plus R. N is the number of phases. So we are studying a two-phase signal design. So for us, N is 2. R is the red time, all red time. So red time computation we have seen before. Red time is equal to red time of one phase is equal to green time plus amber time for the other phase. And capital Y in the equation for CO is given by Y1 plus Y2, where small y1 is equal to Q1 by S1 and small y2 is equal to Q2 by S2. Then finally we have found out CO, which is the total signal cycle time. Now we have to find out the green times for the two approaches. Green time 1 G1 is given by small y1 by capital Y into CO minus L, and G2 is given by Y2 by Y into CO minus L. CO is the cycle time. In this problem, the necessary details are given. That is, you have Q for roads A and B, you have S values, you have the capital R value and number of phases N. So you can find out Y1, Y2, then you have capital Y, you have the equation for capital L, you have the final equation for optimum cycle time, which is CO, and you obtain the value of CO. Then you have to find out G1 and G2 separately. Okay, then yeah, for an all red time for pedestrian crossing you need 12 seconds. So finally the total signal cycle time along with pedestrian crossing time and amber times of 2 seconds for each phase. So green times for both plus 12 seconds for pedestrian crossing plus 2 seconds amber time for each phase. Total signal cycle time comes to 67.5 seconds. Next type of traffic control devices are road markings, which are used to regulate, control, warn or guide the traffic users. So materials used for road markings are thermoplastic paints or glass beads, which help in night visibility. There are different classifications of marking. First is carriageway marking on the carriageway where vehicles move. Then special markings at intersections. Then markings at hazardous locations where there are obstructions or level crossings or barriers, etc. Then markings for parking. Then word messages like stop, slow, keep, clear, etc., which are shown in traffic signs, can also be marked on the road using thermoplastic paints. The one type of road marking is longitudinal marking, in which there are center lines which separate the opposing streams of traffic, and there are traffic lane markings which separate the different traffic lanes, and no overtaking or no passing zone markings which are indicated or marked on the center of the road to indicate that no overtaking is allowed in the particular stretch of road. For center lines there is a specification, that is, the line width is 100 mm and length of segments should be 3 meter with 6 meter gaps. Similarly, for traffic lanes, the line segment length is 3 meter, gap is 6 meters, and for no passing zones they are marked by solid yellow lines along the center of the road. The other types of road markings are turn markings, which are provided near intersections to give information about turning to different directions. Then stop lines, where vehicles should stop. Then crosswalk lines, which are the pedestrian markings or zebra crossings. Then the yellow line on the curb, which indicates that curb is the road side, which indicates that parking is prohibited. If there is no yellow line on the curb, we can park there. Then there are the border or edge lines inside the carriageways where there is no curb provided. The road intersections are the final topic in the traffic engineering. So road intersection is a place where two or more roads cross. So there will be straight going traffic, turning traffic and crossing traffic. Classification of intersections are of two types: intersection at grade, that is all the roads crossing are in the same level. So merging, diverging and crossing are the operations involved in intersections at grade. Intersections at grade are unchannelized, channelized, rotary or roundabouts and signalized intersections. Next type of intersection is grade separated intersections, where different roads cross each other but at different levels. So the traffic does not interfere with each other. One road goes above the other road, or one goes below the other road. So there is no interaction between the traffic in the two crossing roads. They cross at two different levels. And from going from one road to another road, there will be interchange facilities provided. This is the schematic diagram of a intersection. You can see this is a schematic diagram of an intersection which is at grade, or two roads are crossing here. They are both at the same level. So vehicles are going straight, they are turning, and they are crossing. Going straight, turning, and crossing. So wherever you have a dot, that is a conflict point. Conflict point is a place where two streams of traffic are crossing. So here this straight going vehicle and this straight going vehicle are crossing here. This crossing vehicle and straight going vehicle are crossing here. So you have this many conflict points in an intersection. So this is why you need a traffic signal, because these conflict points are points where there is a chance of collision or accident. So to avoid this, you have intersection, like signalized intersection or roundabout or grade separation, etc. These conflict points are dangerous. You have to reduce the number of conflict points. Requirements of intersections at grade are that the area of conflict should be small, the speed and angle of approach of vehicles should be small, then visibility must be there, then change of path should be eliminated, that is vehicles should travel on the same path, and also geometric features like turning radius and width of pavements should be adequately provided. These are the requirements of intersections at grade. Factors to be considered in the intersections at grade are relative speed, that is relative speed is the speed of approach between two vehicles traveling in opposite directions. So as this increases, the collision chance and collision impact increases. Then the maneuver area, that is area available for merging, diverging, and crossing maneuvers. So if only one lane of traffic is there, you need a smaller area. But if two roads with two-lane traffic or more than that are crossing, you need many lanes for the maneuvering process. Then the different type of road intersections are represented here. This is a T intersection, this is a cross-shaped intersection, staggered intersection, skewed intersection, again a skewed or cross intersection, then skewed staggered, Y intersection, and multiple intersection. Among at grade intersections, you have unchannelized intersections and channelized intersections. So I will move to an image and show you that. So this image shows an unchannelized intersection. That is, there are no structures provided on the intersection to separate the different streams of traffic. Here this road will have one traffic approaching here, that road traffic will go this way or this way. The traffic from this road will go straight or turn this way. So but these streams are not separated by any means. So they will occupy the same space at the same time, so that there is chance of collision. This type of intersections are not recommended for busy roads. This is only for low volume traffic. See here you can see a T intersection, traffic movement. Here there is conflict point. Here there is a cross-shaped intersection, conflict points are there. Here there is a skewed intersection or a Y intersection. Here also traffic conflict points are there. When none of these intersections are channelized, all of these are unchannelized intersections. In these two intersections, you can see that as the traffic approaches the intersection, there is an increase in width. This type of intersection is called flared intersection. Here also, as the traffic approaches the intersection, there is an increase in width. So it is called flared intersection. Then the channelized intersection this can also be explained using the image. This slide shows two pictures of channelized intersections. So this is a channel, this is a channel, this is channelizing island. Sorry, this is a channelizing island, channelizing island. These two are channelizing islands. The function of these islands are to channelize or separate different traffic streams so that there is a ordered movement of vehicles on the road and through the intersection. So here you can see the schematic representation of different types of channelized intersections. Here there are two channels on this big road and two small channels here. So you can see that how different streams of traffic are separated using channels. This stream is separated from this stream. This stream is separated from the straight going stream. And in channelized intersection also there are different types, like T intersections can be channelized, cross-shaped, and also the Y-shaped or skewed intersections can be channelized. The advantages of channelized intersections are that the conflict areas are reduced, and also the angle between the intersecting traffic streams are controlled, and speed can be controlled using channels. Next type, after channelized and unchannelized intersection, in intersections at grade, there is another type, that is rotary intersection or the roundabout, where there is a central island, circular island in the middle, and all the vehicles from different roads will circulate around these island and then radiate outside towards their desired direction. And there are different design factors of the rotary intersection. There is the shape of the central island, radius of the roadway, weaving angle, weaving distance, width of the carriageway, etc. Design speed. Weaving is the movement which happens in the rotary roadway. You can see it in the next figure. This is a rotary. It has a central island. Vehicles from different roads will enter the rotary roadway. It is this, and it will execute weaving operation here. Weaving, that means vehicle which enters the rotary roadway from here will go this way and it will cross to this lane. The vehicle from this road will enter in this lane and cross to this lane. That is shown by these crossing arrows. So this operation is called weaving. It happens here, it happens here, it happens everywhere inside the rotary roadway. So there is a central island, there is a rotary roadway, there are weaving operations conducted along the weaving length of road. Then there is a weaving angle. There is an angle between the weaving streams. Weaving operation is the crossing of two traffic streams in the rotary roadway. So vehicles enter the rotary roadway, undergo the weaving operation, and then move out to the direction which they desire. The vehicle entering from this leg can move out in this leg, or go weave and move out in this leg, or go weave again and move out in this leg, etc. Then the last type of intersections are the grade separated intersections. That is, roads crossing each other will be crossing at different levels. So as all the crossing process is eliminated, there is no conflict points or conflict area. And since there are different levels, there are special facilities provided for vehicles from one road to move to another road which is at a different level. These facilities are called the interchange ramps. They can be direct, semi, or indirect ramps. This is a picture showing a grade separated intersection. Here you can see that one road goes above another road. So these roads are actually crossing each other, but they are not touching each other. They are in different grades or different levels. So there are no conflict points. But how a car from this road can go in this road? So for that, a facility called the interchange or interchange ramps are provided. So here you can see there are some ramps or other facility provided. Here one road is going this way, one road is going this way. So if a vehicle from this road has to enter this road above, it can come this way, can go through this ramp, go up and enter this road. Similarly, all these ramps can be made use of. These are interchange ramps for interchanging between two roads in a grade separated intersection. This is another example of a grade separated intersection. Here you have this road, again one road here, again two roads here, one road here. So this intersection involves many roads. So you need many ramps for transferring vehicles between these roads. A vehicle going this road have to go this road, have to go through this road. So you have many curved ramps provided for changing direction of vehicles. The direct ramp is in this way. That is, here you have a road going above, but it has to go uh, in this direction. That is, there is a road in this direction and road in this direction. So a vehicle coming through this road has to go this way, but it does not cross here. It crosses here at different levels. So there is a ramp provided here. In semi-direct, the vehicle has to go this way and along a curved path and enter here. In indirect, the vehicle has to go above the flyover, then traverse a curved path and come through here. In the direct and the semi-direct cases, the vehicles can travel through the ramp like this, then enter the main road, but then it has to merge from the right side, which causes conflict. Here you have left and right streams, so it is a left drive traffic. So if you enter a road from this side, you have to cross the opposite lane traffic to enter this main road traffic. Same thing here, but here the distance traveled by the vehicle is more, because here you don't have to cross the bridge, you can merge before that. Here also you don't have to cross the bridge, you can merge before that. But here the road lying above has to be crossed first, and then you have to traverse a circular path. So the distance traveled is more, but the merging process takes at the left side of the road at the same direction traffic. So there is no conflict while merging. So the smoothest operation is possible by indirect interchange ramps, since the merging process takes place at the left side or the same direction traffic side. Advantages of gate separated intersections are that there is no crossing conflict, and there is increased safety for turning traffic, and also increase in comfort and convenience, and saving in travel time because there is no conflict, and capacity is also high, and also access control is possible like expressways and freeways. That is, vehicles can enter a road only through the access ramps, not through any access point. So the speed can be high, and hence the road can be classified as an expressway or a freeway. Disadvantages of grade separation are that it is very costly to make structures like flyovers or overpasses and underpasses or interchange ramps, and there is limited right of way. That is, the width of road if lesser, construction of complicated huge structures are difficult. And also, if it is a rolling terrain, again the grade separation process will be difficult. I forgot to add these pictures before, so I'm adding it at the end of the presentation. So road markings, the different images from highways for road markings are shown here. You can see the direction arrows here, the lane separation markings, the no overtaking yellow marking at the center of the road, the marking at the edge of the carriageway, then different writings like slow, school, stop, ahead, etc. Then the markings for the zebra crossing. Okay, these are some examples of road markings. And by this, all topics related to traffic engineering from module 4 and module 5 are covered.